Hello and welcome to New Consciousness Activation, and welcome Michael O'Connor today to our conversation. Michael, I'm very excited to have you here. You're a professional astrologer, and so we get to talk all astrology today. So I'll let you fill in any details about your introduction.
It's my favorite topic.
Good.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. I've been an astrologer professionally for over 20 years, almost 25 now. And it's been an exciting journey. And astrology continues to excite me. And it's about twice as long, well, not quite, no. It's been about 30, maybe 36 years or so since I really began to get into it. So I've been a student of it for a long time, and I came by it quite honestly in terms of just a natural passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure I was going to be an astrologer until maybe my late 20s. And then it just struck me that this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been dedicated ever since. And my interest is not simply to be an astrologer, to do astrology, which is, of course, the business side of things in a lot of respects. But my deeper passion and interest is to know how and why it works. In terms of it, when it comes to my work, my interest as a life coach astrologer is to help people, realize their potential. I'm what's called a humanistic astrologer, which is a little different than what's called a traditional astrologer, which is very bent on prediction.
Absolutely.
Humanistic astrologer, or what's also known as a modern or psychological astrologer, is interested quite a bit in the free will factor. How can one engage their consciousness in a co-creative way, etc. So that's much more interesting, and I came by that very naturally.
And I have to tell you that the reason we are talking today is precisely that, because I was really looking for a person who had a specific approach to astrology. Okay. I have lived with astrology kind of around me all my life, although I myself do not practice it, but I've had it around me all my life. Yeah. And it's always been more of a sort of predicting factor that was at the forefront of that practice. And I am really inspired by humanistic astrologers, or people that really use it as a tool to really understand a human being and our potential, and coach people to achieve more, rather than sort of the prediction of here's what's set for you by the stars and here is what's going to fall on your head, at this particular time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, exactly. There's a probability factor for predicting, but it occurred to, I was, again, right from the get-go, a natural-born psychological astrologer. And but when you look at, again, what's called traditional astrology is very focused on prediction, and that in the most positive sense created the precision of the science of measuring the when and the timing, etc. And it's rather a technical aspect of it. But yeah, what I came to realize increasingly is that you can describe it as like the chakra. We're getting an echo, right?
Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of coming and going.
Okay. It's like there's 7 levels to the expression of anything. Mm-hmm. So you can look at it that way. Basically, it's just a number 7, and say that you can take a root chakra approach, or a sacral chakra approach, or a solar plexus chakra approach, for example. Mm-hmm. That's a simple way of saying it. It's not that basic, but yes. Most importantly, it's about free will and possibilities, and how are you going to work with this? Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear, my cat is really trying to get in here, but she's like very hard working on the door, but I'll let her sit there.
It's not an astrology show.
Yeah, and I must tell you, of course, and I'm sure our viewers are admiring the backdrop to you. You want to tell us what that is?
Oh, it's a lovely batik I just picked up a little while ago, just doing enough while I was in New Hampshire. Yeah, well,
It's
uh,
beautiful.
I was in need of a little background because the
Yeah.
blank wall isn't doing a great service to, promote. And yeah, I'm happy
Yeah,
with it. It's exciting.
it's cool.
Thank
All
you.
right, so let's start from the beginning, shall we? Let's talk about what astrology is. I'm sure a lot of people are very comfortable with that topic, but there are some people who, astrology has had a kind of somewhat a bad reputation for some time, and it's kind of bunched together with like fortune tellers and things like that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what it really is.
Of course, in ancient times and even in the Renaissance, etc., astrology held an esteemed role.
Right.
And it has in many cultures and continues to hold that position in various cultures and among various circles.
Mm-hmm.
There's two reasons why astrology did get its negative reputation, just to address that first.
Yeah.
One is the fatalistic approach, giving the astrologer assuming too much power and not being in a service role and not being in support and a sort of a humble wisdom that can be used to support good choices.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was because it didn't land well in the scientific model, which is a type of materialism model. And the metaphysics of astrology just wasn't a good fit. So, a lot of people who deem themselves scientific and, coming from the scientific method, approach astrology very unscientifically. They approach it actually as a religion. They're projecting a belief mindset on it. Like, oh, that's not science, so in other words, instead of apply the scientific method, they, push poo-poo it that way. Now, the best way to basically describe astrology is that it's a natural psychology. It's based on the rhythms and cycles of nature. The four elements, the four seasons, the waxing and waning moon, is the basis of it. That's called a sun-moon-earth relationship. Then we add the planets. The signs, there's signs and houses in astrology. The signs are recognized in two ways. Western astrology just simply divides the year by 12 based on solstices and equinoxes. And that's just a tidy way of determining a 12-month period. In a more traditional sense, the constellations, which are often assumed to be the zodiac, but they're actually not. The constellations are the constellations of the zodiac. The zodiac is known as the circle of life, and it's more it's representative of cycle. Yeah, it's the cyclic model, not purely about constellations. And then people say, what's in the stars? It's better to basically understand that type of mystical thinking is valid enough, what's in the stars. But more specifically, it's what's going on with the planetary relationships as perceived and experienced from us here on Earth. Come on.
So is it, the easier way to understand, so everything is cyclical, right? And we're moving around the center of the, galaxy, the central sun, and with that, all the planets moving around that. The easier thing that we can understand is the seasons, the seasons change on Earth. In each season, we are kind of affected by different, let's say, weather, right? So it's different energies that we're experiencing. So as we are moving through these cycles within the galaxy, within the universe, right? We get into these different energetic patterns.
Well, yes, just to be clear about something. The solar system, which is in the galaxy, which is in the universe, a galaxy can be regarded as like a body. A galaxy is like a person in the universe, and a solar system is like a cell in the body, for lack of a better word. So that it starts to become very small, a solar system. But when you get close to a cell, it becomes very intricate, very intelligent, very by design. So while there's massive cycles, like the entire galaxy turns on its own axis every 250 million years, according to astronomers, and I often hear people talking about astrology, and they say the sun is moving through space, and it's like, no. The sun is moving with the galaxy. So to say that the sun's moving through space is to miss the statement that the galaxy's turning and the sun is moving with it. So the galaxy, when we start to measure cosmic speeds and sizes and distances and proportions, well, it becomes, as the saying goes, astronomical. They're astronomical large numbers. Okay. So just to put in context.
Yeah, when I was talking about the sun, I wasn't talking about our sun. I was talking about the sort of, it's called the central sun, which is like all galaxies are moving around. Which is probably on the astronomical level, not within our solar system.
No. Not all the galaxies are going around. Well, there may be some who theorize that. That may be true, but mainly, theories in astronomy are that galaxies are moving all the galaxies are expanding outwards, and I'm not sure. I think those are theories. We're not sure, but we know that they're not. Each galaxy, it would appear, has its own core, its own central hub, and it orbits around that hub. It's spinning in varying rate and speed. I'm not sure. Maybe there's some studies, but all of these astronomical observations and theories are great. Astrology becomes much more personal. This is where we get into the psychology. It comes right down to home, the earth plane. And with all the current YouTube stuff on the flat earth, it's almost like a bit of it's an interesting study. At first, when I was, don't know if you're aware, but on YouTube, for example, there's tons and tons of flat earth kind of converts or proponents. And it's interesting to observe. And at first you think, well, these are a bunch of nut jobs kind of trying to suggest that the earth is a big flat disk in space and this kind of stuff. But what is interesting is that it's a wonderful study of perception of that. So the flat earth movement is resurrecting the geocentric model, and astrology is based on the geocentric model, where astronomy is largely based on the heliocentric model. Both are valid. Like the fact, I would assert, I don't have the authority to disagree that all the planets are orbiting the sun and so forth. I do believe that's true and factual, but not the flat earthers. They think it's something else, and I won't go into that. But what is true in their argument is that our perception is that, and what would therefore amount to even our experience from a psychological point of view, is that all of the sun, the moon, and all the planets in the entire universe, for that matter, is going around us. So even though that's not true, it is true in a linear factual sense. It is true in a perceptual experience sense, both individually, for you and I, but also for all of humanity collectively. So I just want to qualify that's really important. So what we're getting down to now is that we, as conscious beings, we have consciousness and we have perception. And that's the beginning of the psychology, which produces what could be deemed a very intimate relationship we're having with existence. And more specifically, when we say existence, where astrology comes forward, is we're talking about the solar system. Very specific. Now, the fixed stars of the constellations are outside of the solar system, it's true, and those do form a very useful and reliable background or backdrop to astrology, and they incrementally appear to move based on what's called precession. So it's a 1 degree every 72-year incremental movement of the constellations appearing to slip backwards, like going what we call retrograde. So where the zodiac is from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, like that, this is going the other way. There's a rather interesting little twist of affairs. But all of which is simply to say it comes down to, and it goes well with your whole position and approach in your work, Natalie, is that it ultimately comes down to the mystery of consciousness. And what it, and one final word I'll put on to that is this. We don't simply have consciousness. We have consciousness and we exist in consciousness. So there's this, call it intrinsically subjective relationship. It's as though some have said, and I like the phrase, we're God experiencing itself in a cell. Each individual, we could say, would be like a cell in the body, for lack of better words, right? But it ultimately suggests that this is where perception and paradox comes forward, where we realize we're it experiencing itself, but our experience is that we're separate from it, and it's separate from us, and we're separate from one another. And then all the religions and all the appeals of moral, ethical, and compassionate, empathetic thinking is we're one.
Right.
That mystical and spiritual appeal. So, which is true on one hand, there is no division, no separation. But on the other end, in terms of our experience as personalities with relative objective awareness, and I say relative because it's not absolute. The notion of absolute objectivity is an illusion that is still promoted in scientific circles, especially. But even people who are very dogmatically religious, while they're not scientific, they're doing that too. In other words, there can only be one God, and it's my God. Right. So it goes on and on like this. This is the basic psycho-spiritual riddle. That's the best, simplest way I can describe it. It's a paradox. It's a riddle. We're in it, and it's in us, and we're it. And there's no separation, but we experience it due to our intellect, what's called our lower mind, which is, I describe it as the dividing, sorting, categorizing, differentiating, and separating function of consciousness, which produces this state of, or this scheme, shall I say, of experience, right? So all of this backdrop promotes the basis, the foundational core perspectives of how astrology works, is that we're not simply merely being influenced by planets. It's more intrinsic than that. That's the very important statement. It's not physics. It's not forces and leverages and fulcrums and pressures. It's not physics. It's metaphysics. And metaphysics is communion-based. It means there is no separation. And if we live in this solar system, on this planet, in this solar system. It's like we exist in this cosmic cell. So we don't then in that consciousness start to think about near and far. That doesn't make any sense. It's like saying my toe is far from the top of my head, and therefore one is separate from the other.
Right.
And that's what the argument that they're presenting really amounts to, right? Anybody who presents, an objection, sort of a criticism, a cynicism, or anything about astrology, when they say the tendency is to think or project the paradigm, which usually in this case is either a religious dogmatic one, I'm not allowed to, and I don't believe in that evil, or a scientific one, which is I'm coming from a different paradigm, but that paradigm, what many people who deem themselves scientists come from, they are assuming religiously that the paradigm they function from is the only paradigm.
Right.
So the notion of metaphysics is kind of, there's no app in their consciousness, but because they're assuming that they're objective, they think, well, it's impossible. I'm an objective being. There is no such app. That's what it seems like. They're like, right?
Right.
You appreciate that? Okay.
Yeah. So I want to I guess break it down a little bit. So you said it's a metaphysical connection. So can we put it into kind of more? So as we are living in this cell, as we are living in this, you can say the soup, right? In the soup, you can't really separate one ingredient from another.
There you go.
Kind of together, right? We are being obviously affected by those energies, affected by the influence of those celestial bodies around us.
We can use the word influence is valid enough. That's where, again, the riddle comes forward, because we measure the cycle and the timing. But the way astrology works, we realize while we use the word influence, it should be put in parentheses. It's the better, this is where we get into the discussion of synchronicity.
I like that word.
Yeah, synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence, or the fact that various things coincide and there's meaningfulness in them. And this is where we start to get into the metaphysical model, which means beyond the physical. The meta, beyond, can also be understood as transcending a merely empirical perspective, transcending a simply materialistic consciousness. The metaphysical model incorporates the physical, but it adds dimensional layers. Etheric, emotional, imaginative would be together, and then a mental plane. So there's these layers which all things in existence are comprised of. Like even a cell has those layers, a person has it, the planet has it, the solar system has it, the sun has it. This is the idea of metaphysics, is that there's nothing in the universe in the manifest form that is outside of that multidimensional layering. We see that layering in our very body, from our skin to the epidermal layers to, get into all the systems right down to the skeletal system, and then we go into the cellular, etc. So with all these layers, same thing basically, but that all those layers exist within the material dimension. So that's where physics is very material dimension, and metaphysics starts to not only incorporate the other dimensions, but it wants to recognize them as operative, not just simultaneously, but intrinsically, like you said, like a soup. There's an intrinsic, like they're not, the notion of separating them, like is like we might in various experiments in science, like we can go through various forms of metallurgy and separating various properties within things. We go, ah, there we go, there's the separation, right?
Right.
But and we can, let's say, extract the metal from the rock and so on and all this. But when you get into this metaphysical model, you can look at those layers as objective in their own right, but ultimately it's a thing. For example, just say one last example. If you dissect a person, it's just like Humpty Dumpty. You won't be able to put him back together again.
Right.
You will have it's not merely, we're not merely a sum total of these components. And this is where you get into the mysticism that the ancients so strongly asserted and recognized, is like the prana, the breath, and then, which is linked, it's a part of an intrinsic mechanism as the activation of the consciousness that's embodied in the, call it the vehicle, right? It's all these words, the subtle bodies, the etheric, astral, mental bodies work with the physical body. But when we die, or dream, but basically we leave the physical body, but we're still in what's called our mind. I was just hearing interesting quote by a famous spiritual teacher, says, "You're not your mind." Well, in a way, that's not quite true. You're more your mind, but I think it's fair to say ultimately your soul is not your mind. So it's true to say you're not your mind, but you're more your mind than you are your body. This is where we get into psychosomatic notions of body mind, and where various modes of healing, whether it's Reiki or all kinds of distance healing, starts to come in.
Right.
So astrology exists within that paradigm, that metaphysical, call it esoteric, some people will call it occult, which has this kind of dark feeling. But when we say metaphysical, it starts becoming sophisticated again, if you follow.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So let's make it
this kind of philosophy.
Yeah, go ahead.
This what I know it's a bit intricate, but this big, deeper model, this paradigm, what's called the perennial philosophy that exists behind astrology, is one of the more important areas to start your studies in astrology. It doesn't have to. There's no have-tos with anything. You could approach it from any of a variety of angles. A very playful, elemental level would be fine. But if you really want to get into it, or you could even say underneath it or within it, if you really want to get it, then you got to go into the deeper how and why it works. And then you not only are you, when you study the how and why astrology works principle, that paradigm, now you're deeply into the psychospirituality of a person. It becomes parallel. It's not just a study on its own, because astrology's meaningfulness is directly based on its application to people.
Well, and that's what I want to do. Let's talk about application to people, because in these conversations, I really want to help people understand the tools that are available to them, to really understand their reality. And as we become more evolved, we begin to be aware of the complex nature of ourselves, that we are not just this one human with one body, with one mind, that we have these experiences that span lifetimes, and many of them we bring with ourselves, maybe even within the subconscious memory, but we just bring them with ourselves. And so as we become more aware of who we really are, these are the tools that begin to help us really explore our nature and understand ourselves. So in terms of the practical application to the human beings, how do you use astrology to help people really understand themselves? So kind of starting from that.
Well, as mentioned, it's important to note that there's different approaches to astrology. That's a
Mhm.
very important consideration. And not no even two traditional astrologers won't operate exactly the same way, which is true to dentists. That,
Right.
right? I mean, they're very close parallels often, but they can diverge and goes into the quality of the person and the relationship and
Mhm.
the rapport. That's part of it. Um, Traditional astrology, once again, at worst, is highly predictive, and it can be useful. It can be useful, but it can. People are afraid of hearing news
Yeah.
about the future, which will invariably activate their instinctual fight or flight response and their imagination. And
Mhm.
you have to, like in other words, they start to conjure what that could mean, or when they can scare themselves to death if they get that. So now I think it's fair to say even traditional astrologers bring a wisdom of approach to it and try and make it clear that you have free will. But it's that very reality of working with people in a very human way which gave rise to modern astrology, which is more celebrating and encouraging and supportive of free will choices. And it can see the probability factor of the when and even what areas of life are likely to be influenced by things,
Mhm.
by the cycles, by the astrology factors, the astrology factor, if you like. But it again works with clients in a co-creative way. So a
Mhm.
person, so that's just the main important point, that if you're going to go to an astrologer, don't assume they're all the same. It's just not. It's
Absolutely.
like, for lack of better words, it's like chocolate bars at the, there's that many, and they're all chocolate bars, but they're not all quite the same, right? And they
Right.
taste a little differently. And then there's different categories of dark, and then there's milk and all this, right?
Right.
So there's all these ways of understanding. Now, the other thing is that based on your astrology, which is the technical information required is the birth date, month, year,
Mhm.
the place of birth, and the time is ideal but not necessary. But the closer the time, the sharper the picture.
Right.
Okay, so the picture being sharp is not just a who you are, but that's part of it. It's about when certain things will occur and so forth. So on one hand, the astrology can be used purely as a who are you tool. Why are you here? What constitutes your life purpose, your destiny, the destiny, meaning what's the direction of your life? And that those words even themselves are always a bit difficult to define in simple ways, but
Mhm.
destiny can be described as the direction of your life in a manner that is beyond everyday ego considerations like survival, food, clothing, shelter. And
Right.
it incorporates the realities of achieving those, and it touches on what's called self-actualization, you could say,
Mhm.
meaning, one is achieving certain fulfillments through career, but it also brings a lot of value to intrinsic like activities like hobbies,
Mhm.
just the quality of your consciousness, your morality. And it's not all about you should be this. It's not that. It's more, how are you? See, it's not imposing an ethical model of what you should do and be to be good. No, it says, how are you? How are you means, how you doing? Like if you're not in touch with your morality, your ethics, your humanity, then how are you? And if a person's completely out of touch with their morality, their ethics, and their humanity, well, one might argue that they're operating psychopathically.
Right.
And that might be fine for that person. It's like, wow, no sweat. Well, I'm not bothered by anything.
Mm-hmm.
And people dying and suffering and pain, and others, the burdens of life, doesn't bother me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's fine. Now, but so there's this everyday worldly, you're in the body, you're in the world, you want to be harmonious, happy, healthy, joyful, fulfilled, whatever the words are, all of the above.
Right.
How are you? Now, if we take the other side of the picture, is that it takes a deeper perspective. And by the way, we'll say, and I'll ask people, do you believe in the soul?
Mm-hmm.
And often they'll go, yes. And I'll go, well, if you start to entertain the language and the notion of soul, it starts to have implications. Like there's, what is behind that word,
Mm-hmm.
soul. So the idea is that it gets to that the soul incarnates. It goes there rather quickly, and 99% of the people I work with always go, yeah, I know that. Now, it doesn't mean a person has to know that, to get astrology, and it doesn't mean a person has to believe in reincarnation to be wise and good and happy and all the attributes and qualities mentioned. No.
Mm-hmm.
But it does come forward that it presents a different perspective on what life's about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was hearing this one bright fellow yesterday, and he was talking about the flat Earth. Actually, I'm fascinated by it because once again they're indirectly arguing the model of geocentrism, which is what astrology is based on. Even though astrologers know that there's a heliocentric reality, the perceptual, psycho-spiritual, our experiential reality is geocentric, right? So that's okay. Now, but what he said was, which I thought was valid enough, but he says, we're here to love. We're here to love.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really exciting and valid, but I thought to myself, no, there's more than that going on. Now, that to say that's not to denigrate or underestimate the value and the importance of love, but the model that astrology has taught me, what appears to emerge from the zodiac, the circle divided by 12. Mm-hmm. See, the zodiac is just a circle, and you can divide it in half and in 4, and then you have 4 quarters. Right. And then each one has 3 segments, like a beginning, middle, and end. So each is that's like 4 seasons, and there's a beginning, middle, and end to each season. So it's very tidy. So you begin, the zodiac's just a cycle or a circle divided into proportion, and it goes into 12 tidy little proportions, right? For those basic reasons. So it's fairly nice and easy that way. Each season, beginning, middle, end. Okay. Now, the point is that where was I going with that?
The guy who was talking about...
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you. The astrology teaches me more something like this. As souls incarnate, we're here to learn to be responsible co-creators.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the school of life.
Right.
Like life is ... and you can fill in the blank. And if you say life's a journey, okay, great. If it's a ride, okay, great. If it's a bitch, okay, there you go. If it's a school, whatever the word is, and you can have more than one, but whatever the word is, it starts to frame some of your priorities, values, perceptions, attitudes. Mm-hmm. So from the standpoint of a school, we start to see our experiences and our lessons in a new light. Mm-hmm. We're not merely in a fight or flight instinct response. We now become kind of what could be called conscious, and it invites in what is described as spiritual warrior consciousness. Now, people are doing this all over the place, even people who don't believe in anything beyond their own physical. They do it intuitively. Mm-hmm. And in other words, a person can be completely atheistic, and so on, but they still have morality. They make sacrifices for others. They mature. They work on themselves.
Right.
They evolve as a person, and so they do that from a place that they may not have investigated deeply, but I think they would probably say it's my humanity.
Mm-hmm.
In my heart. Then you go, and I would want to go on, your humanity, your heart. So when you say your heart, are you talking about the organ?
Right.
Or are you talking about the chakra
Mm-hmm.
or the heart center, right?
Right.
Everybody knows who's been upset and who hasn't been upset along the way, that if you tune in to where you feel upset, it's always in your chakras,
Right.
Okay, so anyway, the point is that we're here to be responsible co-creators, and
Mm-hmm.
the astrology provides insights and guidance, and both in terms of who we are in a core sense and where we're going and when certain events will turn and when you'll have beginning, middle, and end completions.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I listen to people a lot of times out there, they're talking about, oh, if only we were given a blueprint for our life purpose, I'm like, yeah, we were. And they're like, if only we were given a blueprint for our life purpose. I'm like, yeah, we were. They keep saying it. I'm like, you guys are kind of ignorant. It's like the blueprint is right there, and
Right.
all the societies of the world have used astrology to do that. Now, you can work with other people. Okay, astrology is wonderful that way. You can work with counselors, healers, psychics, medium, all kinds of people with different kind of call them approaches. And that's great too. Or you can go to a life coach and they can help you through a process of, okay, answer these 10 questions about your life. And we'll see what we can narrow down what's your life purpose. And they can. So I would take my hat off and applaud all of the above. Anything that can make my day feel happier and support me to be more, healthy, flowing, happy, alive, successful, whatever the words are, right?
Right.
Astrology, just simply in the final word here for this round, is it brings a type of science to it. Science meaning it's very measurable about your nature can be measured. The weight, and we can bring in a planet. So if a person has a strong Mercury, I do, they're going to be very communicative. If they have a strong Venus, they're going to be very sensual. If they have a very strong Mars, they're going to be very strong, very physically strong. If they have a strong Jupiter, they're going to be very philosophical. If they have a strong Uranus, they're going to be very eccentric or individuated. If they have a strong Neptune, they'll be very meditative, mystical. You probably have a strong Neptune, is my general guess. If you have a strong Pluto, they're really into power. And you think, okay, well, that's convenient. Somebody goes, well, that's convenient. You put these attributes to the planets. Well, how about if I rearrange them? Okay, you can do whatever you want. But the fact is, when we read the chart, we can see, and then we play it back to people. They go, that is exactly, like not kind of. Like they'll go, that is dead on. Now, so in other words, we can see a person's nature. Now, what happens is when you have all the planets, you look at an astrology chart, maybe another time we'll do that. But this is a template. This is just a base template. But you look at an astrology chart, it shows, because all the planets are always moving, it shows these lines called aspects of connection. And when you understand the language of astrology, by the way, when you said earlier that my interest in astrology is there, but studying it seemed to not quite be your aptitude, right? But you can study it like a language, like any other language. And once you know the basic principles of the letters and then the grammar, then, basically you could teach astrology to high school students.
Right.
You could teach it to elementary school students, in fact, from the standpoint of basic knowledge, but to enter into a level of, making it work, so to speak. Well, there's going to be there's always going to be prodigies. I can imagine even young children would get it, kind of a prodigy mind for that, right? Just like you have 6-year-olds playing magnificent piano. You're like, what? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, but generally speaking, astrology, even in its most, some of its most scientific applications,
Mm-hmm.
in everyday usage, kind of amounts to about grade 11 or first year college. It's not like one needs to have some doctorate or something. No, okay. So it's not really even okay. Grade 11 or 12, depending on the system that you're in of high school, if you studied since you were, in elementary through high school, you would certainly have all you need.
Right. So let me interrupt you there for a second. I want to ask you. I want to go back to something you said. The blueprint.
Yeah.
So those of us that see ourselves as energy beings, right, coming into this earth to have physical experience, we believe that we actually plan our experience, or at least plan certain touch points through our life experience before we get here, right? So we sort of set a certain direction for our experience. So then is the blueprint that you're talking about, it helps us then understand something that we don't really consciously remember.
Yes.
Right? Because when we come here, our memory gets wiped away of what happened before. And so then this blueprint becomes a roadmap or it helps us become more conscious. Would you say that about what we plan for ourselves?
That is, yes, that's a very good way of describing it. You become aware, self-aware of your nature, of your destiny, become conscious of what your lessons are. But I would like to offer another slightly different consideration to what you just said, though. We're already choosing our next life from that standpoint of understanding that we're souls incarnate,
Mm-hmm.
that the soul takes on a new body each round, and it has X amount of lifetimes to graduate from this school. That's the model I go with. And it's upwards to, about 800 or 1,000. And it's not linear. It's not like everybody 800, that's it. But generally speaking, there's reason to say, there's a model which I subscribe to that says it's about anywhere between, let's say, 700 and 1,200. So if you can imagine, if somebody were to graduate from the School of Life in 700 lives compared to one in 1,200 lives, like they've been here for a while, right? They in other words, they got caught in certain difficult types of patterns and really were slow for various reasons, maybe were wounded or, whatever, all kinds of factors. But the point partially is that we're choosing our next life now. The quality of the choices we make today and tomorrow, and that's where the free will comes in. The quality of our choices and so forth are participating, or they're contributing to what the next life incarnation will be. Now, I would agree with you that when we leave the body and we go into the inner planes, would be called, and there's the afterlife, and there's generally, a period of time of purification and resting, just like rest in peace. And we can even, in those inner planes, the idea is that you can go to school, there's things you can do, experience this and that and learn. But in terms of your incarnation, that's also why they call it the Summerlands. They refer to the out-of-body experiences like summer holidays almost, compared to being in the 3D, basically, where there's a lot of pleasure, pain, physically. Okay. So, but then, yes, I think the soul, based on the lifetime of experiences had most recently, and based on where it's at in the grand scheme of its journey, and together with what would be called a council of wisdom elders, shall we say. This is the model. And the life, as you said, is chosen, and that choosing is subject to the language or the laws of the universe. Okay, it's not outside or within the context of this dimension and realm of experience on this planet, for example. So we're within that context. The planets in the solar system, therefore, are part of the mechanism of incarnation. That's an important understanding. Even though, I don't mean to go on and on here, but the planets themselves are operating at more than one dimensional level. It's rather, they're in the cosmic scheme of things. So this is where some people say, oh yeah, there's people on Venus or something, but they're not in this dimension. So that's a conversation I don't want to overly go into. It's not strictly astrology as such, but it is worth entertaining. But more importantly, the planets in the solar system, like a cosmic cell that it is, with the sun as the nucleus, etc., and the earth plane, the planet as the place where the life experiences occur, right, they're all part of the larger cosmic law. So the planets then, as like features of the cell, so to speak, and each having principles, like Mercury is a different archetype or set of principles than Venus, and each one's very distinct. Like each one, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon, Mars, Earth, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, each is very distinctly different from the other. Mm-hmm. Like, just as distinctly different as red is from green. They're different creatures. And they're all colors, though. They're all colors, you could say, in this metaphor. Right. So all of which is simply to say that, as you suggested, there is this life review and this set of planning, and this based on karmas and evolutionary needs, a choosing when the soul will come in, based on, let's say, those parents are a good set of candidates. Something could go wrong, like free will is always operative. So, unfortunately, something happened. I do myself actually believe that there are accidents and mistakes, even if they're in the small margin, because in the free will zone, you need flex, you need room for there to be accidents and mistakes. That doesn't mean life's an accident or a mistake or random or arbitrary, but it just means there's a bit of flex built into the machine. Mm-hmm. Okay. So all of which is simply to say that, yes, the soul chooses and it comes to the earth plane. So once we're in the material realm, we're in the cosmic, we're in the cell of the solar system on the planet, which is in relationship to the other planets, which are, again, archetypal principles. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot to take in, I know, what I just said, but you begin to realize, right, the planets have, very fundamental principles. Another metaphor is, as you said before, Natalie, with the soup metaphor, mm-hmm. is like, just for lack of better words, the sun is like the onion, Mercury is like the garlic, Venus is like the carrots, Mars is like potatoes. Okay, and it goes on from there, and each planet would be a different ingredient. They're very distinctly a different ingredient, and they all come together to create the soup. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can use many, many metaphors, but then you begin to go, right, so it has, it's just like shopping, or you're a chef. And you go shopping and you go, oh, well, carrots or various vegetables and various ingredients, and we're going to make something with them. We begin to understand that the planets subject to the astrology, like the signs and various other factors that astrology is based on, become all the ingredients of various levels and types of life experience.
So let me ask about that. In terms of, you said you're, like a chef, you're choosing the ingredients. What would that look like when you're working with someone? Does that mean that you're looking for a most beneficial timing for that type of influence, or how does that translate into an actual practical,
Yeah,
say,
that's
life
good.
situation?
That is certainly a good question. Now, part of it is, who are you? Like, what kind of soup are you?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. What's the destiny? What's your purpose? You're a bunch of groceries here. Is your purpose to be a salad, a soup? Are you meant to be, something else? So we're playing with metaphors here, but the idea is that what's who are you? Like your temperament, your character, your really your temperament and your nature. Character is something that changes over time. So,
Mhm.
but we can get this idea, these notions of your temperament, your personality, your nature, your
Mhm.
psychology, okay, who you are, and it shows that, and it brings emphasis then whether you're more mercurial, more Venusian, more Martian, if you like, more Jupiterian. And then, of course, sometimes they blend very equally. Some people are just a nice equal blend of all. Some
Mhm.
are very emphasized. It
Right.
goes on and on like that. But so then it starts to point at what you're here in terms of destiny. Now, destiny shouldn't be seen in a very narrow, uh, absolutely prescribed sense. It's more like a, a direction of probabilities that you're going in, and what constitutes not just what you're here to do in a wise way, which is valid and good, but also what will be joyful, what will be in alignment with your aptitude, what will feel satisfying and fulfilling. And that could lend itself to relationships too. What kind of person will come in and be a good match, etc. But also then it goes in the direction of, what would be a good career choice? Or, oh, by the way, there's a lot changing and it looks like your career will change. Either you're going to get a promotion or you're going to go from being this to that. And it
Mhm.
can tell you when. It'll tell you when, and it'll even go into the processes of that, of getting, like I'll, use metaphors like you're on this highway and there's an exit in front of you and it's about, okay, 6 months away. And then you're going to see that you're going to start slowing down and taking the turn. It's going to be a bit complicated because it's not the, idle sit back on the highway breezing along. You're now having to change lanes and slow down and make sure you get the right turn. And so it gets very practical that way.
Right. Can I just go back for a second to, I liked what you said about the potentials, because
Yeah.
people can have questions about, well, how are we talking about free will if you're saying, this is how planets are aligned and so this is what's going to happen. So how do we reconcile the free will with sort of the prediction of the future? Well, the word potential really allows for that. It just says there can be a high potential of something happening, low potential,
Yeah.
but you can still then choose your way around it.
That's right. There's a lot of factors like astrology doesn't see your genetics as such. It doesn't see your circumstance specifically. It doesn't
Mhm.
know necessary. It can be used to look at the politics of the land. It can be used to look at economic cycles and so on, and even weather. But when you're looking at an individual, it's not telling you about the setting in the immediate sense, like the actual realities of that society and what various dramas or realities are going on. It's okay. So it has to bow out, and then this is where the communication becomes like a conversation. Like you can talk all day long about potential, but if the person's in an area, let's say literally a location where there's nothing available, like they're in the desert, well, it's not much is going to happen. So it kind of brings in very practical considerations like, these things can occur where the opportunity for them exists on one hand, but then it brings in with that location of opportunity, Then it talks about who you are, what constitutes ideals, and what would be you would be have aptitude for, what you would, and then but it can bring in what would be good for you. Like, for example, it would be good for you to overcome that obstacle. It would be good for you to persevere. It'd be good for you to be patient in that relationship with that person, because although difficult maybe in various ways, there's a lot of good in this relationship for you, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So it's just to, bring in, I want to add one more little piece here.
Yeah.
Along the way, there's who we are, why we're here, what we can do, when that might happen, what relationships we're in. It goes on and on, all of this. But also there's a psycho-spiritual or a psychological and philosophical, but let's just say psychological component of, let's say, if your astrology's got a lot of what's called fixed signs, and it's talking about change coming, fixed signs don't like change very much, and they have a hard time with change. So you begin to go into recognition that, oh, you're going to have a difficult time, quite possibly. So this is how you might overcome that. Also, with far planets, like, let's say Saturn is known as the disciplinarian. So if you have a Saturn transit, it tends to create pressure, weight, delay, depression. Like, oh my God, I'm suicidal, practically, people will feel. And then the astrologer can come in and say, well, okay, Saturn's having a strong influence on, let's say, your moon. Say your moon's very emotional, me in my belly, and Saturn's having a direct, strong impact. There's a connection occurring. Oh, it's going to start in 1 month. And then the person goes, oh, okay. And next thing you know, they're like, I feel it. And then, okay, it's going to peak in about 3 months. Oh my God, I'm there. And it can happen both within them, like their emotional, their mental, their whole being is undergoing this sort of heavy negative experience. And it's by synchronicity, it's mirroring outwardly. Like it's, what I'm trying to say by that is, it's influencing how they're in relationship with others, but also it influences, like, that it has a vibration to it, and kind of by destiny, we would say, it calls certain players in. It says, oh, you're going to meet tall, dark, and handsome, kind of thing, is the fortune-telling idea, in the positive sense, for women, for example. There's going to be this man come in. Now, that kind of stuff is, that kind of fortune-telling level of astrology is kind of shallow, and when it would be better to say a healthy kind of relationship for you would be with this kind of person. It would be a person that would be, let's say, I'll look at a certain woman's chart. Oh, you'd like more, let's say, basically the strong silent type versus the social outgoing type. They all kind of know that, but even who they are, there can be a general truth to that, but they can go through an experience. Oh my God, it looks like you're going through this very fiery period. So it's not easy to encapsulate the possibilities of it in this generic way, in any absolute way.
And so this is a perfect thing, because I really want to ask you, there is a tendency to simplify astrology for everybody. There are these forecasts that say, well, Mercury is going to be retrograde, so everybody's afraid that, their fax machines will break or something, or this is what's going to happen, or this is going to be the aspect. And so there's a tendency for people to think that it's going to affect everybody the exact same way, or everybody's going to be in the same boat. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about, or do you distinguish between sort of a generic, almost planetary condition versus, can the individuals then go through their own thing while, at a mass level, there can be a certain condition happening? Does that make sense?
Certainly it does, and that's a darn good question. And it's, first of all, every person there's this old religious saying, every person stands before God on their own feet. So it means that every person's having their own unique experience. You could be two people doing the exact same thing. Let's say two people dancing.
Mm-hmm.
They're not having the same experience. They're sharing an experience.
Right.
And the sharing words suggest, you're you and I'm me. And if we can, like when we see in couples, let's say dancing or figure skating, when we can hit it in that perfect, exact balance and proportion and symmetry and skill, well, hallelujah, right? It's this wonderful, beautiful thing we all love to see and experience. It's a bit artificial in the sense of everyday life, though, but still, it's a wonderful thing. So ultimately, we're all experiencing life subjectively, individually.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when like horoscopes, for example, refer to the 12 signs. So, and it can do that. It can kind of divide the entire population of the world into 12 groups. But it's like talking about the politics for the United States, that you cancers are going to have this general set of planetary influences that are going to affect you generically, as you said, in this way. And if you use that metaphorically, like you're referring to the United States, there's a sort of politic within the scope. Even if you're outside the United States, let's say you're in China, but you're American, and you might, let's say, tune into American news. In a way, you're still influenced by that American story.
Right.
Okay, so each sign can be like a nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good basic way of describing it. And so the astrology sort of, you could talk about it as politics, or you could talk about it as weather. Metaphors, or you can use other metaphors, but basically, you begin to understand that it's generically true. Like there's, Donald Trump's the president of the United States, and there's a certain reality to that, and we're all experiencing it. Everybody goes, how we interpret it, what we think about it is going to be different from one person to the next. So
how each person will experience I think the amount of impact to each person is different.
Yes. Some people, like, it's based in their psychology. Like some people are very political and some people aren't. Like now, it would be probably fair to say that, you wouldn't find, it would be a very, very rare instance. Let's say if you're talking to people, let's say doing a survey in the United States right now, in the United States, that they didn't hear of Donald Trump. It'd be kind of like, right? Maybe they have the reasons why they haven't, but maybe, who knows, right? But generally speaking, it's that reality's there, and it's right. So the same is true of any other culture. Of course, though, if you were asked to name the Prime Minister of France, you wouldn't be able to do it, or the president, you probably wouldn't be able to do it, or at least the average person wouldn't. Even the average American, if asked, what's the name of the Prime Minister of Canada? They'd kind of go, I have no idea. And if they were asked, if you were to ask me, what's the name of the president of Mexico? I'd go, I don't know. Now, that a person it'll show in a person's astrology chart that they're very political, and they almost know the name of all the politicians, right? But then you say, okay, you're very political, so you think that, that's, you're in the know, right? You're like really got it all dialed up. Okay, you a sports fan? No. So if I asked you who's the captain of the New York Rangers, do you know who that is? They go, no. So I guess your knowledge is limited, isn't it? You see, and it could go in every single circle. I'm hoping I'm staying on track with what you're saying. The point is, it gets, there's like a macro generic, that's where we use the 12 sign, macro generic, But then ultimately, yes, it goes within varying degrees and stages of influence. Some people in their astrology are very political, some are very athletic, some are very arts and culture.
Right.
And
No, and yeah, I love that, and that metaphor of, there's one president of the country, but really how it affects everybody. Yeah, I'm cautious about generalizing and
yeah,
astrological influence to everybody, because I think it really simplifies it and reduces,
um,
its impact and what it can help.
it's a very sophisticated, astrology is very sophisticated. It's nothing, it's like music, it's like any other sophisticated area of human study. It's like if you were to study psychology and go a far distance with it, let's say to doctorate level, for
Mhm.
example, it would be deemed very sophisticated. If you were to go into advanced levels of engineering and or manufacturing or medicine or music or anything, it's sophisticated. So
Right.
so so if the tendency, for people to project upon astrology a type of simplicity, because the horoscopes, for example, kind of generally provide just that sort of relatively simplistic generic insights, right? Then you judge astrology on that basis. That's like judging a hardware store on the bolts. It's like that's how that. So to an astrologer, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of simplistic to think that the hardware store only sells bolts,
Right.
right? Is that what you're saying? Is that's what it sounds like? You're kind of saying that, or all it sells is motor oil, or all it sells is car parts.
Right.
But but it doesn't. It's doing many things. So yes, people like to challenge astrology, and I've had a lot of challenges over the years. They kind of want to present themselves as knowing something, but they really do when they do that is present massive bias.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking at them going, well, I guess you haven't really investigated into bias too much but anyway, it's a very sophisticated, the science of astrology is sophisticated enough that it would take up until advanced levels of high school anyway, but advanced levels of high school students could get it. They would be fine. Okay, fine. The psychological application of astrology, really where it gets into its finer application, not just a high school student could do that. They
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have the maturity, the emotional, the experience, the maturity that comes with time and experience to do it, because the sophistication of it is such that the application is different. So, for example, you can have a grade 12 high school student who's very, very able in, let's say, calculus. But that doesn't mean they can go run an engineering firm, or neither can they become like a consultant strictly,
Right. Right.
right into that domain. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a pretty good example. The technical sides of many things, even a person with a master's in, let's say, engineering, but no experience,
Right.
it's like they'll be recognized. uh, I don't know if there's a master's in engineering, but I guess there is. Main point is that uh, the science side is, ironically, as sophisticated as it is, it's simpler than the
Psychology.
art side.
Right.
The,
So unfortunately, we are completely out of time, and I so totally get that it's such a sophisticated art. that
Yes.
you really can't have a, even a comprehensive discussion in a very short time. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell our viewers, what are you up to these days? Is there anything that, how your website address and everything will, or is in the email that the viewers received, so they can find you? Is there anything in particular that you do right now that you want to bring to their attention?
Well, yes, thank you, Natalie. Yes, well, I am, in fact, creating a new website, just updating the one I have, and it's going to be, again, looking new, but the flavor of it will be the same. So that's exciting for me, just to bring forward a new website with more up to date with the technology and so forth. I'm also creating a second website because I'm steadily moving in the direction of being a full-time life coach astrologer. So I'm certified as a life coach, as well as, having many years of experience and practice with astrology. So the life coaching model is just that it clarifies quickly that there's a coaching, not a predicting aspect.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, and that's okay. Predictions featured in it. It's not dismissed, but it's brought in without being the central focus. The prediction, therefore, in this regard, becomes a probability, not a certainty, and we can work with that. That's where astrology is a wonderful tool for any life coach kind of person, really. If they, they can use numerology too, and that would be helpful too. There's other tools as well. Also, I'm in the process of creating a school. Actually, it's an online school. So I've given courses. Because astrology is quite sophisticated, you can teach one course, but invariably you're caught at worst with the person's assumption that, oh, I'm taking an astrology class, right? And that often astrologers will offer astrology classes, and they'll have a fairly elementary kind of extracurricular element to them. But then people think, well, I've learned astrology. It's like, no, well, actually, all you did was you took a very introduction to the 101 level of it. It's because people don't realize, it's like if you were to really go the distance, it would be like you have a master's.
Right.
You would have to go the distance like getting a master's degree in any sophisticated science or arts program, whether it's economics or engineering or medicine. You would have an advanced level of knowledge to really be an astrologer, honestly. So it's just it's a dedication thing. One has aptitude, certainly, and dedication. I just wanted to clarify that. So the school, I'm excited. It'll take a little longer. The two websites should come out over the next month or two, back to back. So rather than embed one in the other, I thought I'd just have two separate ones, and it's easy to do, and why not? Okay, rather than embedded pages. But the school will offer a comprehensive set of courses. And people have been asking me this for a long time, so I started to design the courses, and now I'm in the actualization of the final, presentation of them. So there's upwards, so far I've got about 16 courses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's probably going to be something to the tune of, well, upwards perhaps at least to 20. I think I'll stop it there. It's not like if one completed all the courses, they could certainly get an accreditation from me, right? And they are designed to provide a very comprehensive overview, but I'm taking a non-traditional approach to it. Where if many astrology books on the bookshelf you pick up, they're all the same. They're the same. They'll say, this is the only astrology book you'll ever need. That's a bit of nonsense. That's like, whatever. That's like saying to get grade 6 level astrology, this is all that you'll ever need. And they're right. That's grade 6 astrology. We're not talking about master's level. So anyway, so my two websites and my school. And
coming up soon.
It's easy to find me on my website, and to ask questions. I provide a lot of information there. So And yeah.
Michael, thank you so much. This was very enlightening.
Yeah, thank you,
I
Natalie.
really enjoyed our conversation.
And I did as well with you. So thank you. I look forward to future times.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.